In the first place, I would welcome those people who connected tonight, all the way from Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan, or wherever they are. It was a very short notice for all of us, and we are grateful that we have some of our friends and colleagues who had the opportunity to connect tonight. Our gratitude also goes to General Tondosama, who is the head of OAPR, which is the Ivorian Office for Parks and Reserves. We've been working together with him and his team since 2011 through very difficult times from time, and we can just acknowledge the incredible support and work that we could have done over the years with them. I also want to thank both Michele and Neal for coming in at a short notice. For those who are in tonight, for us, it's quite a big crisis if we have a cancellation of a speaker, and we had on very short notice the cancellation of the presenter for tonight. And so on a short notice, Michele Menegon, Dr. Michele Menegon and Neal Schoof agreed to discuss this program. And because of the short notice, of course, we couldn't get everybody in who we wanted to have in. But to the two of you, thank you so much for stepping in tonight, and also for this very interesting topic. We don't have the students in tonight, and we have 71 people, which then says there's a very big interest in the topic that you will be presenting, and we are all looking forward to it. So who are these two people? Just in short, Michele Menegon is he's a conservation biologist, Italian-born, been living in Tanzania, I think, for close to 20 years, speaks Swahili fluently. He's an applied scientist. He's the type of guy who says we don't talk theory, we do things on the ground. And he's got an absolute incredible passion for what he's doing, very, very extremely knowledgeable. And at the same time, with somebody with incredible drive to make a difference to the local people, local communities, who is considered, and he correctly viewed, as the real custodians of protected areas. Michele has been working in Banco for quite a number of years. He is also a director at the PAMS Foundation and co-CEO of the LCA. Thank you, Michele, not just for your presentation tonight, but also for the work that you have done. Neal Schoof is a landscape architect, and he owns one of the biggest companies in Africa doing landscaping all over Africa. On top of that, Neal is an incredible, committed and lover of the protection of nature. Neal has spent, since his youth, he spent a lot of time with his parents in protected and conservation areas. And he's one of the people that I have seen so many times. He just disappears in nature. Once he's there, he gets a total different persona, and he just becomes one with nature. His absolute love for nature. And Neal is also a professional person, and to have a professional person to dedicate time and effort and energy very much on a pro bono basis is just extraordinary. So to these two presenters tonight, thanks for your time and trouble. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. And I will do a brief introduction on Banco, and also about one of the activity that actually led to the zoning of the park. And then I'll leave Neal to talk more extensively about that. Banco is a very special place for various reasons. Of course, is a forest fragment in Côte d'Ivoire, a country which has lost a lot of its forest in the last decades and centuries. So it's important for that, because it's still, one of the forests that are that exist in Côte d'Ivoire, but it represents a very peculiar place, because it is somehow right in the middle of a huge city, which is Abidjan. And the first time I saw it, I actually fallen in love with it, because is what I would love to have in my city, and is what I would love actually every city of the world to have. You are in the center of Abidjan, you cross the gate and you walk maybe 10-15 minutes, and you could be somewhere in the Congo Basin, because it still retain the full characteristics of a, let's say, almost pristine lowland rainforest of Africa. And we think it has an incredibly value, especially if we think long term for a city like Abidjan. So we were super excited by the idea of working in Banco, and actually became a very interesting place also from a personal point of view. With Neal, I don't know what Neal is going to say because we didn't really talk much about this talk because of the short notice, but it's a place we love. And when we are in Abidjan, sometimes we go to Banco, even, I mean, for example, for a walk at night, to experience Banco, because Banco is an experience, and is a fantastic experience right in the middle of a city of maybe 5 million people. So of course, Banco is, because it's so specially placed, it has great potentials, but also is threatened by a set of potential problems. And of course, the work we are doing also would like to address some of those problems and make sure that Banco will still have long life, and also will be sustainable from an economic point of view, from a touristic point of view, and so on. But again, is like a true jewel in Abidjan. Of course, there are fantastic other forests, but Banco is really outside your door for the people of Abidjan. So it's and it linked them to the past. I mean, when Côte d'Ivoire had a super extensive forest, especially in the southern part, from the coast and a few hundred kilometers inland, which now is lost for over 95%. So it represents very different type of values for Abidjan, for Côte d'Ivoire, but for the entire world. And I don't think, or I don't know actually, but I don't think there's another place like Banco on the planet, a forest of over 3,400 hectares, right in the middle of a big city. Very quickly, one of the activities that we wanted to carry out for actually proceed with the zoning is to understand what is still in Banco in terms of wildlife. And of course, we have found interesting animals. We have also realized that some animals actually are coming from outside, because of course there's roads and paths, and they use those ways to, let's say, colonize Banco, even if they are not forest animals. But in general, what we have found, you can see on the left the size of that tree. There's still proper, super tall, incredibly beautiful forest trees. And as I said, it's like being, if you are dropped there for an helicopter, you really could struggle to understand that you are, I mean, few hundred meters away from a big city. So we have basically designed a sampling approach, both with camera traps and active search in the forest. So we have been sleeping in the forest with a tent and deploying camera traps. Very quickly, we have found, as I said, interesting forest animal, I don't go, I mean, through names or unless in case you can ask me at the end. But the beautiful yellow frog with blue eyes on the top left is actually a very interesting animal, because he's a frog of the genus Morerella, which only live in Côte d'Ivoire. And Banco is one of the 3 known locality of this frog with very restricted distribution, highly endangered, and still in Banco. So we were very pleased to find it there. Actually, Banco is the place where it was first discovered. As I said, together with forest frogs, we also found frogs that are actually adapted to more open areas, open savanna habitat, and they are colonizing Banco from outside. And this is a sign of the fact that Banco still retain, of course, most of the elements of a proper forest, but is also highly disturbed. So some frogs which wouldn't stay in a forest like Banco, or let's say in a forest like a typical lowland forest of the Upper Guinea area, are actually finding their way. So they are not really welcomed presence. There are, of course, reptiles. We found several reptiles, including something you wouldn't expect in a big city, like probably a 6, 7, maybe 8 kilos gaboon vipers. There are several lizards and geckos. So there's still a reasonably good amphibians and reptile fauna. So for the people who visit Banco, actually looking for reptiles and amphibians could be a very rewarding activity, because it's still rich in species. Then through camera traps, we have realized that there's still small carnivores like the Pardine genet and the Cusimancet, the palm civet, the civet. We have seen the poto. You can see it on the left side of the screen. The Pels anomalure, like a big black and white flying squirrel. Actually, we were together, Neal and myself, and was very exciting because just probably an hour before, we were actually wondering how difficult could have been seeing an anomaly in any of the Ivory Coast forest, and actually we saw it like an hour later in the light of our torch in Banco. The white-bellied pangolin and many more small mammals. Of course, the big thing is the presence of a small population of chimps. That, of course, is a fantastic element of Banco. Is also pose some questions, because I would say that, from a taxonomic point of view, ourselves, Homo sapiens, and Pan troglodytes, the chimpanzee, belong to the same family, the family Hominidae. And I would say that probably Abidjan is the only city in the world, probably for millions of years, of hundreds of thousands of years. There were no cities at that time. Is the only city in the world where 2 species belonging to the Hominidae family coexist together. It's because also those chimps actually live in the city center of Abidjan. Of course, they are surrounded by trees, but it's actually the city center. And this is fantastic. This is really a special thing. This coexistence also poses some problems because, of course, the encounters between Homo sapiens and Pan troglodytes could be difficult to manage, especially if chimps get more and more used to the human presence. In those 2 pictures, you see on the left, one chimp from let's say the biggest population, which could be maybe 10, 12. I have no idea, maybe there's more recent data, but also probably what is a big male on the other side of the forest. So we think that maybe male who are not actually happy to stay close to each other, they are trying to form another group one of the male is trying to form another group in another area of the forest. And also this is also a challenging process. So basically, we have realized that Banco is still reasonably rich in wildlife. The presence of chimps in Abidjan basically is extraordinary, and I think it should be managed with with great attention. I think there's also room for recovering. I mean, in terms of vegetation and fauna, probably once that long-term sustainability of Banco is ensured, probably some specific projects to enrich the fauna with what actually got extinct in the last few years or in the last 10 or 20 years could be something that could be planned and thought and designed. For sure, it remains a place with mostly, both from a vegetational point of view and a faunal point of view, a good example of Upper Guinea rainforests, which are actually extremely special forests by themselves. I now leave Neal to keep going with the presentation.
Wow, thanks very much, Michele, and Chris, thanks very much for the very kind introduction. And bienvenue, nous, mes amis à Côte d'Ivoire. Je parle un peu français, je parle anglais ce soir, pardon. And what we'll be looking at when I take you through the presentation then is to liken it a little bit to a story, to a movie, because it's got a bit of a thriller component to it. It's definitely got a bit of a comedy component to it. And I hope you found it very interesting. What Michele has mentioned has been fascinating in terms of the natural wildlife, fauna and flora that you actually find in the forest at Banco. And yeah, without any more delays, let's get on with it. So as Chris mentioned, Insight Landscape Architects was appointed to prepare a landscape framework or a tourism plan for the LCA and for PAMS. And we've been working on the project since 2018. So although we're the new kid, well, almost the new kids on the block, we've been working on it for the last 4 years. And I must say it's become an absolute passion project. It is really unique. It's really, really special. It's really one of the few remaining natural forests in Côte d'Ivoire and actually for the greater part of West Africa. It's got unique fauna and flora, and it's one of UPER's really flagship parks within Côte d'Ivoire. And it's easy accessible because it is the closest to Abidjan. As far as we know, in terms of a tourism management plan, this hasn't been done before for a national park, in particular in terms of Parc National de Banco. And what also makes it really, really special is that, as Michele mentioned, it's completely surrounded by this hot urban jungle, the complete opposite. And lastly, in terms of its function now, you have Abidjan, which completely surrounds the park, and there is pressure on the park that it also serves as an urban park and not just as a conservation area. And that is the complexity of this project, is that you need to respond to both needs. So the Pempetal is Le Parc National de Banco. There is distress out there. There's distress in this forest, and we want to try to sort it out. And that's what the story is about. We have some fantastic stars in the story. We have the LCA, Leadership for Conservation in Africa. Of course, we have the Office of the Arboretum des Parcs et Réserves. and also the PAMS Foundation. And they really some of the most critical role players in getting to where we are today. Later, we have additional supporting cast that have become involved in the project, who I'd like to highlight is actually Conservation Capital. And we work with a bigger team as well of very passionate people. We have had involvement of Sili Malan and Madame Atsin on this project. Getting to the context, how, what, when, why. Just to highlight what Michele has already spoken about, is the park is located in Côte d'Ivoire on the west coast of Africa, and the park sits within Abidjan. Zooming in on that forest that Michele referred to, just have a look at this. If you look at Côte d'Ivoire, the dark green, and Ghana adjacent, the dark green is actually where there are tracts of natural forest left. And don't get too upset, put that chocolate down, because as you know, the chocolate production and the cocoa bean fork chocolate production is produced by these countries. And it's such an easy crop to grow that unfortunately it does result in some of the decimation of the natural forest. Getting back to Parc National de Banque in the context of Abidjan, just look at that. It is truly amazing to see. The forest is completely surrounded by the urban pressure of the city, and you can just see the contrast. Sights and sounds of park. What is this park? For those who haven't been fortunate enough to visit it, it is really a magnificent place on this planet. These are some night shots of the trees, and obviously they look completely different. They actually look like lightning bolts in the evening. Some of the beautiful reptiles and amphibia that Michele and I discovered on some of our night watches within the park. There are some existing facilities in the park, which ourselves as planners look at repurposing. Just showing you the size of the smaller trees within the park and the main access way into the park as it currently stands. And there's a supporting cast, as Michele alluded to, the local chiefs and the local populations that live around the park have also been custodians of this park. And the LCA engaged with ourselves, with the local communities and the local chiefs with regards to the challenges and also how they view the park and perhaps what the park can contribute to their environment in terms of education, job opportunities, etc. So as planners, what we did was we started analyzing the park in terms of what is there. And we started to do a layering. We started to look at all aspects of the park, from the infrastructure to the vegetation to the hydrology. And we started to really get excited about preparing different maps that we could overlay that would really take us to our end goal, which is to have the tourism management plan on hand. We looked at, for instance, this plan of the human impact on the park. Where is degradation occurring? Where are invasive plant species occurring within the park? And where are more pristine areas? We also looked at fauna in the park and where the more fauna is located within the park and where we have found less fauna to be located. And we also investigated different studies that have been done in the park with regards to the environmental aspects and the fauna and flora. And that information we also incorporated within our study. So we eventually, this was quite an important plan. We looked at which parts of the park were the most disturbed, taking all those factors into account. And you can see that the portions to the top left-hand side are a bit more pristine. That's the lighter color. And there's a central portion as well. That's a lighter color that is also more pristine. The darker shades indicate areas that are more degraded. Then there is an antagonist in this park. One of the antagonists is the extent of the watershed of the park. So we didn't just stick with, okay, this is the park, let's have a look at what is occurring within the park and how we plan for this park. We also looked at the watershed because there is a river running through the park, which is the Banco River. And unfortunately, the catchment does extend outside the park. And I'm sure that a lot of you on this call and presentation this evening will understand the complexities that come with watersheds and also rivers within natural areas having an extent of watershed which is outside the park. You then become subject to what is happening outside the park. And what is happening? Through no fault of their own, settlement has taken place and there's a lot of soil erosion happening outside the park and also a lot of pollution of the watercourse that's running through the park. So you have a Banco River in distress. Part of the reason that you can actually say that is because of the sediment that's been carried by the river. It is in distress. And then also you have solids that are transferred from outside the park into the park. There are also unnatural floodplains developing in the park because of high storm activity, high runoff activity, and it's resulting in flooding in the park where there was not flooding before. And that has the detriment of actually killing off some of the trees and the natural flora within the park. So we took our study a little further, and I'm digressing here, but this is actually a very, very important point. We started looking at ways of how can we control this sediment runoff outside the park, that we can take the stress out of the river and also start controlling the solids. And we later in our study actually went as far as putting a budget together for rehabilitating 17 hectares of the disturbed area outside the park. What you're seeing here is vetiver grass, which is a fantastic rehabilitation grass. And to give you an idea, just look at that root stock. Can you imagine the stabilization that actually brings? Quick growing, easy growing, and will stabilize those soils. We looked at different methods as well of retaining soil and starting to block the worst erosion channels that we could find. So starting to look at tourism integration and what are we going to do with the park. This is a flow diagram which we follow when we start looking at bringing change to the park and actually producing the tourism master plan or the tourism development plan. And we start looking at what the park offers, what is the demand on the park and what is the future demand on the park. And we also look at what is the access to the park, both within the park and outside the park. What are the attractions that it offers? What are the amenities that are there? And what is the awareness of the park? You know, and one of the most important things that we found with the park is that there's awareness within Abidjan that it's not safe, and that would obviously be a point that we need to address. We also looked at the bigger picture. What we'd very much like to do is actually create a necklace of tourism within Abidjan. And when I say that, we start connecting different tourist attractions within Abidjan onto a tourism circuit. And Parc National du Banco actually, hopefully, will be the crown in that tourism circuit. Very important to really start creating this tourism awareness and highlighting all the different attractions within Abidjan. And what really makes this park magnificent as well is you land in the financial capital city of Côte d'Ivoire, and as Michele mentioned, you can immediately be transferred into an enchanting natural forest. When you move into the forest from the urban areas, the temperature drops, the noise of the city disappears, and it is truly magical, absolutely magical. So we did have a lot of analysis, and we're now building up to this tourism zoning plan that I've referred to earlier. We looked at the entrance gates, we looked at accessibility, the future light rail that is being built within Abidjan, and how could that connect to the park, the current road networks, and what would need to be done to ease access into the park, the entrances to the park. And without going into too much detail, from a time point of view, we got to our tourism management plan for the park. And what you really see there is a plan that we believe can guide the next 30 to 50 years of the development of the park, and really bring that balance about between having a park that needs to serve an urban need as urban respite for people that live within Abidjan, but still serve its conservation function within the city, and because of it being this important segment of lowland forest. To really get into the detail of this plan would actually take much longer than what I've been afforded this evening. But you will note two orange dots within the center of this plan. And those two dots refer to two aspects of tourism development within the park. Firstly, and most importantly, I want to highlight that they're actually disturbed areas already, part of which contain the buildings that you saw earlier, and the other part contains a cleared section of the park. So immediately we identified those areas as being important areas for probable future development. When I say development, one of those circles would be a day visitors area where we can start providing that urban recreational facility for the city of Abidjan. And the circle with the eye notification on it would then be more of an overnight facility, conference facility, and even a day spa facility within the park. So immediately we also split the two different functions of how future visitors would actually interact within the park and designated areas. What's very important, and what I want to highlight on this plan as well, is that the top half of the plan is actually completely conservation orientated. The impact in this area will be very low. We want to limit activity within the park to the central south area, so that this area becomes the area that is a little bit more developed in terms of more hiking paths, the facilities that I spoke about earlier, and also where activities such as a little park run can take place, a little mountain biking can take place, which then plugs into marketing the brand and awareness, how to get more awareness of the park within the city of Abidjan as a safe urban recreational space that you can visit. The main driver behind that, of course, is to increase revenues for the park so that we can actually increase the protection and the sensitive development of the park. Other facilities that we're looking at within the park are educational facilities. We do want to provide educational facilities for the surrounding communities as well as for the greater Abidjan community. And the park also has a full spectrum of overnight accommodation, from very, very small high-end accommodation to more medium priced accommodation, and in the center of the park in that disturbed area that I spoke about earlier. So we do want to actually also capture the accommodation spectrum within the park. Again, light footprint, very light footprint development with the northern part of the park really being left to conservation, a few hiking paths, one very small high-end camp, and a few hides. One of the really, really exciting facilities that we're looking at here is a treetop tower. It is magical to also move up through the canopy and not just be to be restricted at ground level, so that you can actually experience the trees and also the canopies by moving up in a tower to overlook the park and its tree canopy. Of course, no presentation would be complete without discussing COVID. And that didn't stop us. I really wanted to highlight again that the passion for the project continued. Our meetings continued. This was through the world lockdown during COVID. Everyone was ready to really be involved in the project and continue the passion. It led to many debates, which were always amusing, entertaining, and I see a little bit of despair here as well. And this has continued all the way through. COVID restricted travel, but we continued working on the project and engaging with OIPER in Côte d'Ivoire. We then took that plan that you saw earlier and actually broke it down into phases. What can be done? What are the quick wins? What are the easy wins? How can we just improve branding? How can we upgrade pathways? Can we have a little fun run to improve awareness? So it's really multifaceted in terms of its approach. It's looking at two key aspects from that point of view, and that is really about what activities can be offered and what facilities can be offered, and what will they bring to the guest and the visitor experience in the park. That was broken down completely through the study into really tangible elements. And obviously your high order cost elements would probably be in later phases of the rollout of the tourism zoning plan or tourism management plan. What I also want to highlight is that we have extended our supporting cast. We were very excited when the LCA and PAMS decided to appoint conservation capital to really assist in drawing up actual business plans for the park. How can our planning that we completed on the tourism zoning plan really become pragmatic and implemented? So various funding models were looked at, various budgets were looked at with what is needed to achieve what activity or what facility. And I won't go into that detail. Also, Pam's engaged with natural capital to have a look at the natural capital that the park offers in terms of carbon sequestration, the incredible service that it offers to the water reservoirs of Abidjan. 30% of the water in Abidjan filters through that national park. And that is really providing an ecosystem service to Abidjan. And just lastly, just to touch on that intense urbanism, it's difficult to convey on a plan and a presentation, but to really go from this level of intense urbanism, which is located against the park, to this, which is an incredible natural environment. It's absolutely a passion project. We are so grateful to have been involved on this project for the past 4 years, and we really hope that part of this planning can be realized as soon as possible. Thanks very much.
Neal, Michele, the rest of the team, OIPR, listening to you tonight again, I'm touched by the passion and the commitment and the high level of work being done there, and for your personal commitment and also for presenting tonight. I'm very closely linked to this project, and for that reason I should not say too much because it is in your hands tonight, but it is an incredible project. Also, when I say thank to you and for your work, the incredible commitment from OIPR, what I really appreciate is that OIPR says, we're not letting this out of our hands. We are not going to allow this to just become a central park in New York where kids come and play. It's a national park. It is a rainforest, and we protect it as such, and we zone it as such that we can protect it. And that commitment from them is incredible, and that's our encouragement to keep on going. And also to mention that in the next month, we will have the meetings now where the processes will start with the implementation of this zoning plan in phases. And again, our absolute congratulations for OIPR and the very strong stance they're taking on this. So Michele and Neal, your passion and your drive and your hard work and your presentation tonight for me is incredibly special.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lorraine. I see you got your hand up and you're unmuted already, so please go ahead and ask your question.
Well, I just want to say, I think this is fantastic. And I think, I mean, this could be like what's the term? You know, a standard for other parks in other places. I'm thinking Mumbai, I'm thinking Nairobi, which has so much potential, and they put huge roads next to the park, and it could be all like, you know, people sitting out from hotels and restaurants and observing what goes on. And they failed to do that completely. It was a completely missed opportunity. So I'm excited about this. And I'm excited to see that Chris is involved with it. I mean, we've always known that Chris is involved in other stuff, but we never really knew what. I do have one question. What were the objections that came from either the government or from locals about this process, about this project?
Be careful not to answer all the questions. You know, Lorraine, there were never any objections, but that we are not going to, there were non-negotiables. Non-negotiables is, it's not going to go out of the hands of the conservationists to do it in the correct way. That was an absolute non-negotiable from the beginning. Another non-negotiable is we cannot do it without the support of the local people. Now, you saw that photos that Neal showed. It's, I mean, it's a, like Neal said, an urban jungle. And it's been years. And OIPR goes into those highly dense urban populations and talk to the people. In those areas, there are still four tribal chiefs. And those tribal chiefs are represented in this. The community is represented in it. So objections there were not, because they understand the value of this to be a classroom for the people, 5 million people in Abidjan. It's a passion. And I don't think we ever ran into objections, Neal or Michele, but rather standards, careful, don't break this thing. That was rather what we got. That's how my experience. Neal, Michele?
Yeah, yes, I think we were really welcomed by the community surrounding the park, the four main chiefs and their communities. And I echo what Chris says, and also the role of OIPR, the Arborean parks, in the local communities around the park, and the engagement with the local community around the park.
So did you come up with this idea as a vague concept, present it, and then kind of fine-tune it? Is that how it happened?
Yes, it's been, we came up with the concept after consultation, and obviously all the studies that took place before we then presented it to OIPR, to the Arborean parks, and then they gave their input, which was highly valued. And then we actually tabled the final tourism zoning plan or framework plan.
Wow.
And it was also taken into the management plan of the park. And I think,
yes,
yeah, sorry, Neal.
Yes, we're very proud of that as a team, OIPR actually adopted the tourism zoning plan into their management plan.
And I can just say, in addition to that, and then I think we go to the next question, Johan, but in addition to what Neal is saying, it was a slow-moving process, and of course, during COVID, we got bogged down, and during that time, we, for instance, did training for how do you do what they call public-private partnerships to bring in these people. But the reality is, again, that it started from within OIPR. Our first engagement with OIPR was, what is your need? And it cannot be our need, cannot be what we want. And it's within OIPR. OIPR owns this. And that is the big thing. It's owned by them. And we are only facilitators trying to add value to what they are doing. And Michele will, from our side, on behalf of LCA and PAMS, as from the last meetings, he's taking over from our side this program to work with OIPR to grow it and start with the actual development and into the park. Johan?
Michele, did you want to comment? I see you are back now.
No, I fully agree. I think it has been a fantastic teamwork. And when I say teamwork, I mean ourselves, OEPR, the local communities, and we are extremely careful in trying to make sure that everyone is represented. And because, I mean, there's no reason to work on a place like that if it's not really held as part of their heritage and culture by the people actually who live around it and the people who manage it. So we are actually trying to help on that.
Great. Thank you, Lorraine. Thanks for the question. Leslie, please, we're going to unmute you now. Please unmute yourself. And you're welcome to go ahead. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a lovely presentation. I'm just wondering if there's any, I know you're not sort of in control of it because it's, you know, it's with the local community, but has any thought been made about pushing birding? Because birders tend to be a little bit easier to please than people who go after mammals because there's so many more birds and they tend to be much less invasive. And it could be a wonderful birding destination. And also there would be the opportunity of using the local people as guides.
From the tourism zoning plan point of view, what we did provide for is bird hides in strategic areas. And Michele, you can take over from there.
Yes, basically the approach we have at this stage is actually to make the park more accessible, safer, and a place where it's easy to go and easy to carry out your own activities, including birding. And there's local organizations that which are already providing some assistance, for example, for cycling and walking, and they have already guides. Of course, once the park will enter in the next phase, and some of the light infrastructure will be in place. Of course, I mean, what needs to be done is actually to implement activities and to have, you know, to market them or to actually to make sure that people know that they can come. But yeah, for sure, birding is one of the. We have quite a range of possible activities that goes from, you know, running, hiking, cycling, birding. I mean, also watching fishes, because there's an old aquaculture with big fish, and we would like to have, you know, observation points because these giant catfish. So we would like to have a set of activities that actually allow people to fully enjoy the park from different perspectives.
That's amazing. Thank you, Vincent. I see your hand. I would just like to turn to Sabil's question in the chat at the moment. Is there any local resource exploitation going on? How could this park be saved from bushmeat hunting, cutting firewood and charcoal production, logging, etc.?
Well, just on the bushmeat trade, we actually observed poachers within the park, and it's crazy because it's also very difficult to follow them, because you can literally walk 5 meters off a path and you won't know where you are because of the dense undergrowth and also the trees. So we are looking at a program that PAMS is involved with, that OEPR are involved with, in terms of improving security and making it, as Michele said earlier, a safer place for visitors to enjoy. Michele, I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
Yeah, again, it's part of the activities that needs to be implemented. And of course, there's two sides of that. I mean, the security, which, especially in terms of perceptions, because sometimes maybe there's no actual threats, but it's important that people who actually visit the park feel safe. And it must become a safe place to go for the people of Abidjan before then for the tourists. And of course, would be great to be able to reduce possibly to zero poaching, because is big for Abidjan, but is a very small forest fragment, and any threat to especially to the small mammal population could actually make the difference in terms of survival of those populations.
So I may just come in and then over to Vincent. In the implementation phase now, there will be two elements there that plays a major role. The one is, what do you first have to mitigate before you can start implementing these projects? So there's a lot of mitigation activities that now needs to happen. That would include public facilities. It will include the riverway that comes from outside from the communities in there. It will include, for instance, the existing buildings, poaching. Those are the mitigating things that will go hand in hand with the developing process. And that's why it's such a, for me, this is a sort of a case study of how you could and should be doing this in a small national park, and then eventually it goes out to bigger national parks, because we've got roads leading into parks, we've got rivers leading into the parks, people living on there. But here's a case study in a micro context, I mean, globally speaking, that I think is really something worth looking at. Vincent, over to you, please.
Merci. Est-ce que je peux parler en français pour tout le monde, ou bien je parle en anglais, mais c'est difficile. Je suis français, je suis forestier, je connais le parc du Banco depuis 1979 pour y avoir travaillé en travaux de recherche. J'ai contribué aux premiers travaux d'aménagement avec le bureau du WWF à Abidjan en 1995 et 2000 à travers 2 études. Donc, je connais bien le parc. J'ai des préoccupations, 4 préoccupations majeures. J'apprécie énormément tout le travail qui a été fait, les orientations prises pour la surveillance, pour l'aménagement touristique. Mes 4 préoccupations portent sur les dégâts causés à la forêt marécageuse sur la rivière Banco par les eaux qui viennent du quartier d'Abobo. Il y avait eu des travaux, une première tentative de créer un barrage filtrant pour bloquer les eaux qui viennent d'Abobo. Cela a été pour l'instant abandonné, mais c'est essentiel pour que ce soit fait pour restaurer la rivière Banco, qui aujourd'hui est complètement détruite, défigurée, dégradée. Le deuxième problème porte sur une espèce invasive, un arbre invasif originaire de Malaisie, d'Asie du Sud, une diptérocarpacée, OPA, qui avait été introduit dans la forêt voisine, une parcelle de la forêt de Languédou, qui à l'époque était mitoyenne du Banco, mais n'appartenait pas au Banco. Cette parcelle a été incluse dans le Banco, mais à la suite de l'ouverture du couvert dans beaucoup d'endroits de la forêt, il y a une forte régénération de cette espèce et ça peut créer un déséquilibre par rapport à la forêt naturelle d'origine. Le deuxième problème de plantes invasives, c'est une liane qui est extrêmement abondante dans toutes les trouées faites par les chablis dus au vent parce que dans ce milieu urbain perturbé, il y a probablement plus de casse d'arbres par les vents d'orage que dans d'autres forêts, mais aussi des abattages d'arbres à usage médicinal pour récolter les écorces et les vendre en ville, et des récoltes de bois de feu. J'ai vu quelqu'un qui s'inquiétait d'exploitation de bois d'œuvre et de charbon. Ce n'est pas vraiment une menace au niveau du Banco. Et le dernier problème, il a été évoqué par Michele, c'est le problème des chimpanzés. C'est effectivement extrêmement intéressant d'avoir ces chimpanzés, mais il y a un risque qu'il va falloir gérer dans ce qui est la cohabitation entre l'homme, que ce soit les usagers du parc, les visiteurs, les gardes, ou que ce soit les habitants des quartiers riverains, puisqu'on a déjà observé des vols de nourriture dans les cuisines des riverains de l'autre côté du mur, même si le mur est haut. C'est des choses à surveiller. Voilà ce que je voulais dire en contribution, mais j'apprécie beaucoup ce qui a été dit et ce qui va se faire.
Merci, Vincent. Je comprends. And Vincent, I think between Michele and myself and Neal, we hope that we caught enough about what you said. But my understanding is that you've been involved in Banco for quite a while. Yeah. And that you also worked with WWF at a point, and that you have certain concerns about what is happening there. And you referred, if I'm not mistaken, to the rivers and catchment areas, and certain of the vegetation, and then also to the chimpanzees that through this process could also be threatened. Neal, what you've picked up, please feel free to respond to that. Unfortunately, because it's such short notice, we didn't bring in a translator. In fact, Vincent, we didn't even think about it. So sorry about that. But over to you, Neal, and Michele, anything on your side, please. Neal?
Yes, thank you, Vincent, very much for the contribution. Vincent did speak about a dam to actually control the water going into the park. And again, that speaks to what we're looking at in terms of trying to control flooding that is happening within the park. Also, with that flooding, what he remarked on, which we agree with as well, is also not only do solids move into the park, but invasive plant species like palm oil as well. Palm oil palms, seeds are carried into the park. So there is a lot of invading taking place. Also, what we are aware of as well is that plants have been harvested for medicinal purposes, and that also needs to be controlled. What he lastly mentioned, I think, which you touched on, was the risk with regards to the chimpanzees and the habitation of the habitat of the chimpanzees. But I think from the outset, we do not want habituated chimps at all. So that program would need to be managed that we don't have habituation of the chimpanzees at all. That they remain free, and like I mentioned in the plan, the northern part of the park is a conservation area that we really see as a conservation area, so they can move and remain in that part of the park if they want to. And then also, I think you mentioned, Vincent, that things to do to get food within the park and to be able to do different things, so within the park.
All right, Vincent, I think we could also stay in correspondence with you around this, and your concerns also are OIPR's concerns and our concerns, and those things have to be mitigated. And of course, the chimpanzees, in this very world unique situation, we have to be very wise. And I actually want to call those northern areas, from my perspective, not even protected areas. That's pristine areas. That's absolute pristine areas. You have to let those chimpanzees, we cannot interfere there because it's very, very fragile and would be easily broken. And again, reminding ourselves, this is not a central park in New York. It's not what it must be.
Yeah,
it must remain a protected national park, and that is the overall objective. But Vincent, good to know about you, and also good to know that we could connect with each other, because I'm sure you've got a lot of knowledge and understanding of this very fragile situation, and we could also stay in touch. And thanks for that. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I send you a message to LCA address.
Oui, merci.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup.
Thanks Johan, and good night, goeienaand. Ja, amper gaan ek voort in Afrikaans. Thanks for the brilliant presentation. It's nice learning about this park, and been quite a while since I've seen Chris. In my old days, Chris, when I was still at MediHelp, you would recall me maybe. But yeah. So I've moved into conservation. You will recall our discussion the other day. But nevertheless, I think my question would be, not knowing so much about the park, what the current conservation status is, and maybe is there any species of special concern or threatened and endangered species? Then I have a second question, which is about what current activities is happening there and at what scale. Then my third question would be around the community surrounding what they sort of socioeconomic level and activities are. And then coupled with that, when looking at the tourism development plans, what challenges in terms of tourism and conservation is anticipated or maybe looked that there might be that need to be a kind of mitigated for? Thank you.
Neal, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. The status of the park is a national park within Côte d'Ivoire, so it holds that status through legislation. There are a number of threatened species within the park, and I think if you take the bushmeat trade into consideration, I would almost say everything is threatened. But one of the species that we expected to find in the park, and we're not quite sure it exists there at the moment, for instance, is the pygmy crocodile. And it occurs in Thai National Park to the far west of the country, and apparently did occur in Banco in the past, but there's been no recent sightings. And of course, then the pangolins and another number of other species are also threatened within the park. In terms of current activities, the current activities are quite limited. There's a small kiosk. The École Forestière, the forestry school, has been located in the park for a long time. And going on back to tourist facilities, it is extremely limited. There's a place to buy something to eat or to drink. And then there are footpaths. There's a small museum for educational purposes, which is great, and the entrance gates. So it's really quite limited at the moment. Most of the facilities that are there were orientated towards the forestry school. In terms of the social economic activities, the communities, the four communities that surround the park, it's been very interesting to engage with them from the LCA side, because what has actually happened to those communities or those villages is there's been massive urban sprawl and a massive influx of people into the city of Abidjan. So the jurisdiction of those chiefs that live around the park isn't as strong as what it has been in the past, because you now have transient communities within those communities that are really just using those old villages as a stepping stone to move around within Abidjan. And along with that comes socioeconomic problems and possibly also limited bushmeat trade that occurs in the park as well. So the chiefs appear to have, let's put it this way, just less control of their community. Not that control is the right word, but in Afrikaans is a wonderful word, insai. They have very little insai in the, or less kind of influence within their communities, and they're poor communities. They are very poor communities that surround the park. So yeah, the last thing I think was the challenges. Obviously, we have big challenges in increasing the awareness, increasing tourist facilities and activities. So the challenge, I think, as with many national parks, is funding and really activating the plan that we've put together for the LCA. And that's what excites us about the involvement of conservation capital, and conservation capital being involved in really unpacking an actual business plan for the park to really create a difference in terms of implementation. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just one thing I want to add is that around the challenges, Neal spent even time with city planners to really see where the city is going. And the reality is, if this park is gone, it will have a massive impact in Abidjan, from water to temperature to human wellness. It's got to be saved, and in its most natural form. So the challenges were huge, and at the moment, one of the areas, there's a highway going to go right on the edge of the park. And how do you mitigate? How do you handle that? This is a incredible challenge, but also incredible opportunity. So Neal, yeah, that's just a little bit of addition I want to add. And then there's a question in the chat, and maybe you can help, because I didn't catch that in the French. Vincent also mentioned an invasive species from Malaysia. Which was that? Do you have any idea, Neal, please?
Yes, he did mention that, and that was in the undergrowth. There's a shrub-like plant in the undergrowth that is invading. So it's looking at controlling that.
Yeah, Vincent just answered that, and thank you for that, Vincent. The species are the Trihopia dorata. Don't ask me how to pronounce all this Latin. Deprerocarpacia or something from South Asia, and the Clima mimosa invisa. So you are aware of that, and that's also got to be attended to. Thanks, Vincent, for responding to that question. Appreciate it. I amaze myself that Marty Jasper is so absolutely quiet. Marty Jasper, you didn't know that we can speak even three words of French. And I want to compliment you, Neal, having started his French like in 3-4 months ago. Went a little bit to France, and already you pick up a lot, and well done. I'm very impressed.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami.
Mon ami, j'ai oublié tout. Okay, anybody else? Marty has got his hand up. Hello, Marty.
Oh, I turned my camera on again to come and talk to you. So then you said you wondered why I hadn't put out my hand. But yeah, thanks, guys. It was a very interesting talk. You know, I've had kind of dreams of giraffe and zebras running around underneath the highways of Johannesburg on some of those old mine lands and mine dumps, and, you know, have a bit of a Serengeti feeling within Joburg. I mean, is it replicable within like a Joburg or Pretoria? I mean, you think of Groenkloof, you think of the wilds in Johannesburg. There are very small pockets. I know this is a whole different thing. So, I mean, to try and get a feeling of the size of what they've got it in Abidjan. Sorry, I can never get I can never say it properly. But yeah, I don't know. I think all of the things that, for example, stop people going to the wilds, like people being mugged and attacked and all of that, I think are going to be problems that will be encountered in that park, which is very, very sad. So I presume without monitoring, having people permanently monitoring it, it's going to in time have the same sort of problem. I mean, I was amazed you said the population was, I think, 5 million in close proximity. I mean, that's not dissimilar to a Johannesburg sort of situation. And yeah, I mean, it'll be very interesting to watch how it develops, and hopefully they can keep things under control. But I mean, within a Joburg sort of environment, you'd have people building shelters, building shacks, actually moving in. So I mean, I get what you're saying. There's community and there's chiefs and all sorts of other people that are controlling that sort of stuff. But we don't seem to be able to get it right in South Africa. And then, I mean, I think Frans van Rooyen is actually involved with Table Mountain National Park with sandparks, if I'm not wrong, or there's another Frans van Rooyen, because we had with Honorary Rangers a talk about Table Mountain National Park just yesterday with Honorary Rangers, and it's very interesting to see some of the problems that they're facing. So yeah, we should possibly share the talk from this evening with them, and we can share the talk from yesterday with you guys. And yeah, it's worth connecting and trying to see positives from both sides.
Thank you, Marty. Neal, any response to Marty?
Yes, Marty, I think the exciting thing about Parc National de Banco is that from our limited experience and exposure to the park, luckily the perception of it being unsafe is more perception. We're not really aware of any major negative attacks or things happening within the park. It's really limited. So we're still very lucky on that point. And we are still extremely lucky that the local community do respect the boundaries of the park and have not moved into the park, which is also fantastic. So there's already two very positive starting points to go forward. And OIPER do patrol the park. They have their patrolling teams for more perhaps orientated towards the wildlife and the fauna than for safety at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things, for example, that they've had to do at Table Mountain National Park, I mean, they literally do have a canine unit with Belgian Malinois and the whole thing, and a whole lot of rangers and honorary rangers that are helping, and it's a lot of work, and it's an ongoing problem. I mean, their visitorship, from what we were told yesterday, it's 3 million people a year into Table Mountain National Park, and that's not only one collective park, it's, you know, all of the parks in and around Cape Town. So I think Frans had his hand up, so maybe if someone wants to unmute him, he possibly has some more intelligent info to add as opposed to me.
Frans, you're welcome to come in.
No, Marty, thanks for that. Now, you see, definitely that's why my questions was coming earlier. So you're quite right, Neal. I mean, within Cape Town, definitely, I do believe the park is more safe than if you can see what's happening out there. But nevertheless, that's why I asked the question, what activities currently is happening and what you anticipate, because if you're going to do those tourism activities, that's going to possibly bring the crime, because that's the case here within Table Mountain. It's not that it's happening, but because you bring internationals, it becomes a very easy target for criminals, and that's the kind of one of our major challenges that we do have here in Table Mountain is with the number of visitors. And then maybe a follow-up with that is a kind of question for me. I believe there's no hard boundaries. It's kind of between communities and the areas surrounding. It's kind of open access, or is there a fence? Because that's the way we're having the challenge in Table Mountain. It's open access. People can access the park from everywhere, anywhere, anytime, and that's what's bringing your crime perspective to it. Yeah, thanks.
If I can come in, Neal, of course, you also understand Table Mountain very well. Frans, just one or two comments. It's open access, total open access. It's not fenced, but it's respected. That is the amazing part about it. It is respected. You know, if we talk about, you know, that there's some people who would come in and use the flora, and there's small poaching and things, it is absolutely minimum to what it could be. So that is the wonderful part about it. Second thing, it's a rainforest. Table Mountain is fynbos and a combination of various things, and open areas, walkways, and of course with the the car taking up the Table Mountain, the international flow of tourists in here, and this will remain a rainforest, and that's why the control not to destroy the rainforest. I mean, if you destroy that, then it's over. So that will have to play a major role in there. But then also just from a perspective of Cote d'Ivoire, I'm a South African, and I've spent now probably 11 years of my life going in and out Abidjan and other areas in Cote d'Ivoire. Crime in other Africa countries has got a total different jacket or blazer than what we have in South Africa. I think with basic control, it is not what you will find in South Africa. We unfortunately have an incredible high level of crime in South Africa. Yes, in future it is possible, but that's one of the smaller concerns on my side, because there is control, and it's just a different way of doing in those countries. Neal, maybe I'm just waffling away, but it's sort of two different scenarios. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is, you're quite right, Chris. And I think even if there are more visitors to Parc National de Banco, between that cultural difference, as well as the fact that we also are looking at security within the management plan with the rollout of facilities activities, that hopefully it won't become a big problem.
Yeah.
If I can maybe just add, and I think possibly a lot of it has to do with the sense of ownership from local people, and possibly, and again, it's a South African historic thing. But I think a lot of the people who end up committing crimes and doing the wrong things within the parks, and I mean, when we talk about Table Mountain, it's not just the mountain, it's Silvermine and all of those other, there's lots of areas under SANParks control within Cape Town. It's very vast. And I think it's a sense of people's sense of ownership and pride and respect for it, as you mentioned. And I think that's the key. But hopefully we can learn some lessons.
And Martin, just one thing, you're on the heart of a big city and there are many hotels, but can you imagine that you're a businessman and right on your doorstep where you do your business, you walk into a national park and you sleep in a beautiful little hut on a river, and tomorrow you're doing your business? I mean, if I had that choice, any big 5-star hotel would not stand a chance for me to go and stay there, but that's to imagine. But who better to say something but Amon? Amon, please come in and share with us. He is...
What I said, is that we plan to take into account the issue of criminality, yes, of crime insecurity.
Oui,
yes, of insecurity on the next security plan we plan to establish for Banco National Park. We know the tourism. The visitors, the number of visitors in this park increased on the time, so it is important for the IOPA, the Ivorian Office and Park and Reserve, to reinforce the security measure in this area. When we consider the context of terrorists in Western Africa.
Oui. Thank you, Amon. Très bien. Un deuxième point, s'il vous plaît. En anglais. The second point.
The second point.
Oui.
Education.
Oui, pour l'éducation, I think the Banco National Park is a big site and an open school for education in Abidjan. The challenge is to reinforce the access to the park in order to facilitate the circulation of the visitors. We can organize more education session in the park, and for this we need to build some infrastructure in the Banco National Park to facilitate this activity.
Yeah, exactement.
Yeah.
It is your biggest classroom. It's your biggest classroom in Abidjan. Everything will come through there. It's your biggest classroom and your biggest opportunity. It is incroyable. Anyway,
incredible.
It is just incredible. So we are a lot of hard work ahead of everybody involved. Solid leadership from General Tonosama and Colonel Ngoran and the rest of the team. But it is going to happen. But just again, with the absolute from the LCA side, absolute gratitude and the humbleness that OIPA has asked us to be involved with the others, Conservation Capital and others involved. We are humbled by that, and we hope to really contribute our utmost to this. And then with Neal, I always say, you know, you're such a decent guy and and well-rounded guy. And again, tonight, I always listen to you with incredible respect for the work that you and Michele do and your passion for that. And thanks for sharing tonight. For me, having been so many times with you, been in there, done that, it's still amazing. So thank you, and thanks to everybody who was in. If you will excuse me, Johan, take over, and thanks to everybody.
Neal, I need to just ask you a question. You had a beautiful photograph of yourself there with the tree. What kind of tree?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how old that tree is and how high is it? It just looks enormous.
That tree was 40 meters tall at least, and what I was standing at were the plank roots, and it's one of the biggest trees I've ever seen. It's in a climate though where the growth rate is obviously much quicker than the arid south where we live, So I would guesstimate anywhere between 400 and 700 years. Couldn't even see the canopy properly because of smaller trees to be able to identify the species properly. But that is, there's quite a few trees like that, and we do see them as becoming smaller points of interest on a hiking trail. If you know, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
wow.
could, it's like a house. You could, it's rooms. It's a room of 4 rooms kind of around the base of the tree. Absolutely amazing.
Do you see similar trees that you would find in the coastal forests of South Africa around the Knysna area? Or are they completely
Nope.
different species? Completely different.
Yeah, botanically what happens is the species in South Africa do occur. They go up the east coast of Africa, they cross Africa, across the tropic, the equator, basically, and then they continue a little bit into West Africa. So it's actually amazing. You can have a Natal mahogany in Rwanda, you know, because that's the way the species travel. But no, not those species. They're in a league of their own.
Incredible. I would love to experience the majesty of that tree.
Yeah, it's incredible.
If there are no further questions, Neal, thank you very much. Then we're going to close the session, and yeah, we hope to see all of you back next week.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Thanks very much.